Hey, how's it going? Well, I'm right in the middle of a cabinet build, and of course I got my Norm shirt on today. But anyway, I wanted to stop right in the middle of things here and just show you a couple little tricks that I use when building cabinets like these, so stick around. I'm building this cabinet, and it's basically a plywood box, but it's got a face frame on both the front and the sides. And I want the framing to be equal dimension on both sides. So that means I have to take into account the thickness of the face on the front. So how I do that is this dimension, which is the thickness of the front face, added to the side must equal the dimension of these other sides. So I just rip one of these stiles, these vertical pieces, I rip it down so that the combined dimension of the width of the stile and the thickness of the front comes out to be the same dimension. So whether you look at your cabinet from the front or the sides, these little pillars will all appear to be the same width. Now, you want a nice tight joint here because we have two different pieces of wood and we want it super smooth and a clean joint. So here's how we do that. When I mount the frames, I mount the face frame first, and the framing for the front I make a little bit too wide, maybe 1/8 of an inch too wide. So that gives me a little bit of overhang on these sides. So first thing, I glue and pocket screw this face frame to the cabinet and let it set up. Then I attach the framing for the sides, and I use clamps to draw it tight to the front edge. There's a little bit of overhang, remember, on this front edge. Okay, so we're going to glue that up, clamp it, and then get everything all clamped tight. And once that glue is set up, then you can take a laminate trimming bit on your router. See, it's got that little ball bearing on there. And that will ride down and it will trim this front face to the flush dimension of the side, and you will get a super silky smooth joint, just a little bit of sanding required. So let's talk about the molding for a second. It's always tricky to get these little mitered 45s in the right place on your molding so you get a nice tight fit. One of the tricks is if you have a little zero clearance insert on your chop saw that has a slot in it that's cut by the blade itself, and so it's precisely the width of the cut on the blade, then you can simply take your mark and set it right at the edge of that cut on the miter saw, and it makes it a lot easier to get really accurate cuts and measurements that way. And don't forget to cut pieces a little bit too large and then nibble them down to size. Well, when you're fitting the molding, this hasn't been glued in yet, but when you're fitting this in, you'll notice that when your corners are nice and tight, sometimes it will just have a slight bow in the center, a little bit of a gap, and you don't want that. So I make up a few little scraps of wood and I round them over so there's no sharp edges. And that way I can wedge them in here. It's not practical for me to try and clamp this, but with these short pieces, I can simply install them and put a little bit of outward pressure on that molding and tighten that up, and it will glue in perfectly. One more thing, you may be all Nordic and everything and love working in the shop with your nose dripping from the cold, but the chemicals that you may be using in the shop may not like those cold temperatures. They may perform better when they're at closer to room temperature. So spring for a little heater in the shop. It'll make you more comfortable, and it just might make the chemicals that you use happy as well. I hope that'll help you just a little bit, perhaps on one of your projects. So I'll see you next time.